amazing candidate for us to have as our lead Senate candidate. I'm so pleased to be working with you again. I would just also like to start by acknowledging that we're meeting on the traditional owners' land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I would like to thank Joe and our incredible dancers for the welcome. Ancestral keepers is an incredible term that I'm going to remember, and I want to work as hard as I can to be an ally, and I want to learn from you, Dorinda, and I want to learn from you, Joe, and learn from everybody how I can be a better ally for our Indigenous people. And part of that will be working as hard as I can in Perth to make sure we get a great vote here in Perth so we get Dorinda Cox elected to the Senate. That is one thing that I'm so passionate about doing. You will make such difference. So I just also want to recognise John Steele-John as our Senator. It is incredible to have you there over in Parliament. You are making such an impact, and I'm so pleased to have you here today and hear you talk. You fire me up. I love it. And I also want to say a big thank you to Alison and Tim for coming today as well. You guys worked so hard through the state election, and you've worked so hard throughout your careers, and both of you have left such a legacy. I'm so pleased to have you as my friend. I want to thank you all for coming today. This is the start of something really big and really important. And I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce myself a little bit. Some of you might have seen me before, seen the posters. Some of you might know me very well, like my mum. Some of you might have never met me before. So I'd like to just share with you a little bit of a story so you can understand why I'm so passionate about this, about the Greens and about standing for Perth this campaign. So I just want to share with you that I have worked in climate change policy and sustainability for over 10 years now. And that is great considering how politicised that issue is. I feel very privileged to have 10 years worth of experience. But I want to tell you about a breakthrough moment for me, a watershed moment, a trigger point. And it was back in 2014. I had been working in climate change policy only for 3 years then. And I didn't know it, but they were the golden years. I didn't realise it then, but that was the best time for climate policy in Australia. And I had a front row seat to it. I was in Canberra working on the carbon and pricing emissions policy as the Labor government was rolling that out with the Greens in the balance of power. And I was working on communicating the benefits of this amazing policy. Polluters would pay for their emissions, as they should, and then that money was going to get reinvested into our community. I worked on that policy in Canberra. Then I moved back to Perth, and I was on the other side. I was actually a coordinator taking the grant from the federal government. Polluters were paying for their emissions, the money was coming through to people like me, and then I was helping distribute that to communities. I was working with 3 local governments in the regions, and they were going to get energy-efficient street lighting. Polluters were paying, and we're getting energy-efficient street lighting. It was a policy that was working. Not only was it going to reduce our emissions, but energy costs for those local governments go down, which means rates go down, and it also meant that the community had safer lighting and all of those great benefits that come along with these initiatives when you embrace technology. I loved it. I loved my job. And then Tony Abbott was elected. Tony Abbott was elected, late 2013. And the first thing he said when he was elected was he was repealing the whole thing. The whole thing was going to go. That policy is the only time in Australian politics that we've actually seen a reduction in our emissions. The only time, when polluters were forced to pay for their pollution. Now he was elected, he came out saying 3-word slogans: stop the boats, axe the tax. And at the same time as he was saying the changes he was going to make to these incredible policies that were actually leading the world in some respects, at the same time as that was happening, early in 2014, a bushfire hit the hills of Perth. I grew up in the hills of Perth. And that bushfire was rolling out of control, and our amazing firefighters, including my dad at the time, our volunteer firefighters were out there fighting the blaze. They were fighting that blaze. Some of them didn't even realise that their own houses were on fire. The bush firefighters were fighting to save other houses while their own houses were burning down. And we were going to be repealing the carbon pricing mechanism, which was the only way we were reducing our emissions. And if all of you aren't necessarily aware, climate change makes bushfires worse. In my head, I was just furious. The two things didn't line up for me. Our politicians making this decision and Mother Earth telling us, stop increasing your emissions because it's making bushfires worse, sea level rises, temperatures are getting worse, we're going to have less rainfall in winter. I was just beside myself. I was so furious. How could our politicians be making this decision? Didn't make sense. Until I did some research and I realised that they take an awful lot of money from the fossil fuel companies. They take some jobs from the fossil fuel companies. And it kind of twigged with me. It wasn't good enough for me to do climate policy 9 to 5. It wasn't good enough. I had to work even harder than that because this issue is so important. I had to get out, I had to become political, I had to start organising events. This thing became an obsession for me. I couldn't believe that our politicians were letting us down so badly, so we had to step up. So I started organising events with amazing volunteers. We did the first Perth climate mobilisation event, which was the biggest at the time. It's been blown out of the water since by the student strikers, and thank God for the student strikers. They've filled me full of hope. I ran divestment events, and if any of you still have your superannuation or your bank with banks that invest in fossil fuel companies, it's a good idea to change. And that's when I started getting involved in the Greens. Scott Ludlam had an election, and I went out and I did my first door knock. And my door knocking team lead said I showed promise, which was great. So I understood how to campaign, and I'll jump forward a few steps. I got involved in Tim Clifford's campaign for Perth in 2016. And then in 2017, I went to Tim and I said, hey, do you reckon I'd be a good candidate? And Tim said, yeah, you'd be a good candidate. If you really want to do it, it's a commitment. And I was like, yeah, I'm committed. So in 2017, I ran alongside Tim in the state election, which was pretty awesome. And then from then, I ran for the seat of Perth in 2018, 19, and now I'm running for the seat of Perth again. So I just wanted to share that story with you because I think it illustrates why I have the fire in my belly and why I continue to put myself out here for the Greens and why I won't stop until we get politicians that make good decisions and that will avert the climate crisis, which gets closer and closer and closer. Now, there are more than three, but I'm going to outline 3 good reasons why this Perth campaign is the most exciting. One of them is a little bit depressing, but I'm sorry about that. The Climate Clock is an installation in New York City. It's a clock that counts down the time that we have from now until we have used our carbon budget. And the Climate Clock says we have 6 years, 203 days left until we have used our global climate budget. Oh, thanks, Charles. It also has the lifeline, the percentage of renewable energy. We need to see that lifeline increase, and we need to see our budget slow down. That's why this election is so important, because we don't have any time to waste. We don't have any time to waste. It was important 10 years ago, and it is certainly important now. And that's why we can't stop. That's why I feel like I can't stop. Now, the other 2 reasons about why this Perth campaign is so important are much more positive and hopeful. And that is that we have the chance to elect Dorinda Cox to the Senate, the first First Nations woman from WA to be elected to the Senate. And we get the chance to be a part of that historical moment to get her there and to get her voice, a voice that will speak and represent so many people that have not been represented in that place. We get to have Dorinda there doing that for us. It is a privilege. to be a part of that historical moment, and I hope you feel that too. The third reason why this Perth campaign is so important is that we actually stand a chance to win Perth. We stand a chance. Now, I've got some amazing number crunchers and strategic brains that have done all of the data and crunched the numbers, and they tell me it's possible and it has been done before in other seats. It's not going to be easy. We're going to have to work really hard. We're going to have to knock more doors than we did in the state and more doors than we did in the last Perth electorate, but we can totally do that, and door knocking is great. I show a lot of promise in it, apparently. If you haven't door knocked, give it a try. It's actually the most incredible thing you'll do. You get to talk to people on their doorstep about issues that people tell you shouldn't talk about politics. But people light up when they get to talk about things that matter to them. So give it a try, and I'll even go out with you for your first time if you want. So they're the three reasons why the Perth campaign is so important this time round. Firstly, we've got a ticking clock, and it's ticking pretty fast. We don't have to 2050. We don't. We have to change everything, and we have to change it in just over 6 years. We get to elect our incredible Dorinda Cox to the Senate, which is going to be a watershed moment, a historic moment that we want to be a part of. And we get the chance to send a really strong message to Labor and Patrick Gorman that we're coming for them. We're coming, and Perth is going to be green. And we're going to work really, really hard to make sure it's green this time around. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm so pleased to have you part of this journey with me, and I hope to speak to you one-on-one. If you've got any questions, please come and have a chat to me. But for now, I might pass on to some of our volunteers